All right, we got Joe Deleone. He is back to talk Vikings draft, baby. All right, Joe D is in the house. He is not sick of us yet, but I assure you it will happen. Draft analyst from BleavNetwork and our new favorite guest, Joe D. Welcome back, man.
Appreciate you guys having me on again. It's a pretty exciting time for the Minnesota Vikings. I know we're going to get into it, but I like some of these picks you guys made.
Wow. Yeah. So, I mean, how are you feeling overall? Draft's over. Bittersweet? Are you just gearing up for next year? I mean, what mentality are you in right now? You need a rest?
I feel like I do need a rest, but at the same time, man, things just never stop in the media cycle. But yeah, I am kind of focusing my attention now on this 2024 cycle, just doing starting up those pre-notes for the college football season, the next draft cycle, getting ready for everything, because now's the time to get all your ducks in a row when things start to slow down a little bit. But I'm just glad that I'm not bouncing from media hit to media hit. Yeah. But I appreciate you guys having me on, though, and obviously it's great to chop it up with you guys.
Yeah, you're making the rounds, ESPN, you're all over the place. So at some point when we reach out to you, you're gonna be like, look, guys, I am a little too big.
No, stop. That's never gonna happen.
All right, well, let's talk Vikings. Let's get into this. I mean, before we get into the Vikings itself, what was the biggest holy shit moment of the draft for you? Where you just like, what just happened?
Yeah, I think that the biggest one was seeing Will Levis fall out of the first round. I was one of those people who stood on the table and said that he is not going to be the first overall pick. But when I thought there was a possibility of him sliding, I didn't think it meant all the way out of the first round. And I think that really set a catalyst in a way for the rest of the quarterbacks that were drafted and where they went. And it just so happens that Will Levis ended up in a spot that's very advantageous for him. But I really thought we were going to get 5 quarterbacks, and apparently we are in a spot now where quarterbacks, if teams are not excited and confident in what they can do for the future, they're not going to take that risk. They will wait until day 2 on guys like Hendon Hooker and on guys like Will Levis, which is, again, very far off from the media and also public perception.
All right. Now, I believe you were a former long snapper. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Really want to get your opinion. I mean, I guess we're on a shit theme here today, but did you crap your pants when you saw Jake Moody going round 3? And I think 3 kickers ended up getting drafted?
Yeah, and I don't know if anyone caught the clip that I pulled from my show, The First Team I do with Ryan Roberts. I hated that pick. Jake Moody going in the 3rd round is just such a stupid pick. And look, I'm a former specialist, and I support specialists in every way, and I think it's awesome when guys get opportunities. But the sad reality of it is that there's not much of a difference between the best kicker and an average kicker in a draft class. Oftentimes, some of the average guys are the ones who end up making the rosters and having long careers. You need the guys that are going to be the most consistent. I'm not saying that Moody can't be successful, but my problem here with this is a lot of times we see it happen often. And one of the teams who drafted a kicker and a punter in the New England Patriots did this a few years ago, where they drafted Justin Rowasser, I think in the 5th round, who was actually a former teammate of mine at the University of Rhode Island, and he didn't even make the roster. So there is a lack of consistency with these guys sticking, because all it takes is kickers showing up to training camp, getting into a funk, and then not making a lot of their kicks in practice, and then doing poorly in preseason games. It is such a complicated position because a lot of it is mental. So to take somebody in the 3rd round and hope that guy's head is screwed on right is a little bit risky. There are plenty of good guys that you can get as UDFAs, and it's so much lower risk. And to that Moody point, when you're a team like the 49ers that has your first pick in the 3rd round and you have such few draft selections, why are you spending that on a kicker? Just get as much depth as possible and sign a UDFA. It's a much better route to go for.
This is coming from a former special teamer himself. He's fired up. Jake Moody was always the guy we'd take in round 7 in our simulators on our show. Like, all right, Moody's still there. We'll take him. Fine.
Mm-hmm. Round 7's fine. I'm fine with doing round 7. It's just 3rd round is way too high, because round 7's just basically a UDFA that you are getting ahead of the jump, and you don't have to worry about somebody else beating you out for getting him. And I thought he was good enough to definitely go somewhere on day 3. But again, wasting a pick where you could have gotten a nice depth piece, to me, that just is silly roster building.
Nothing Niners to say? Who the hell's Joe Deleone anyway?
Joe Deleone.
Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised.
All right, let's talk Vikings. Just based off of their draft class, value wise, and maybe that's round one, wherever, but value wise, who did they get? Best value.
Yeah, the best value for me is Dwayne McBride, their last pick in the class, the UAB running back. A lot of people were riding the Dwayne McBride train late into this draft cycle, and I know that he's coming from a small program in UAB, but you put the film on, the guy runs hard. And I think that with uncertainty on the direction of what's going to happen with Dalvin Cook, I'm not saying he's going to take over, but to have that in the rotation is great. I think he fits the mentality and the typical prototype that the Vikings have looked for in running backs. I know this is somewhat of a new regime, a new coaching staff, but still, that is a good secondary option to have for the play style of Dalvin Cook if he still is the guy this upcoming season and there's no changes in that running back room. But I really like Dwayne McBride going where he did. I think that's an underrated pick. What was really weird this draft I thought that the running back class was good, and I think that the positional value has really sunk in really far. Everyone was talking about how Bijan and Jahmyr Gibbs went as early as they did, but the reality of it is all the back end guys that I thought were going to go on day 2 and day 3 didn't go where I thought that they were going to go, and a bunch of them went undrafted. So to get Dwayne McBride where they did is an absolute steal.
Let's do the flip side of that. What was the biggest reach or the worst value for the Vikings?
I admittedly am not the biggest fan of Jaquelin Roy, and he's got high upside. He was a highly recruited kid. I think he was a 4 or 5 star recruit off the top of my head. He has had a lot of potential to be a really impactful player for LSU and hasn't really lived up to those expectations. I'm going to be honest, I just don't think that he has the tenacity of a defensive tackle. I don't think that he is somebody who I can rely on a snap-to-snap basis. I thought that on film, he is somebody who can be a little bit lethargic. I'm not saying that he can't figure it out because he's got the talent. He certainly can. And I'm not saying it was necessarily a reach, like a massive reach per se. I just am not the biggest fan of his in this draft class.
All right. Once again, we got Joe Deleone joining the show. Links will be down in the description. Hit him up. He is one of the best out there, no doubt. Jaren Hall, thoughts? Should we be excited? Is he just a potential best case backup? What are you thinking?
I mean, this is just a different version of Kellen Mond. I think there's some comparisons that could be made to him and Kellen Mond because Jaren Hall at one point was really hyped up, and then he looked really bad at the Senior Bowl, and I think things started to really cool down on him. I think he's fine. I mean, he does have some upside. He's got a good arm. He's a good athlete. I think where he ended up being drafted is a realistic spot. I think that this is good value for where he was selected. But to your question, I think he could stick on this roster certainly longer than Kellen Mond, and I think his realistic outlook is being a mid-level backup. That is realistically his expectation. This isn't the next Brock Purdy. I think if anything, he's somebody who might take a little bit of time before he is in a position to even really contribute or play or step in if Kirk goes down. I don't know if I'd really even trust Jaren Hall to step in any of those circumstances, but I think the pick's fine. Again, got some good upside, good athlete, moves well, throws on the run well. I think that showing that we saw from the Senior Bowl, we should be wary that might be the type of guy that is going to show up in Minnesota.
All right. So I'm going to ask you both. Let's go back to pick 23. Jordan Addison was there. Joey Porter Jr. was there. Your thoughts on the Vikings going Addison over Porter? Would you have done the same thing?
Yeah, and I think you couldn't go wrong with either selection, but Jordan Addison, heck, I love the pick. And we talked highly about what's that possibility that they trade up. And with everybody else moving around and all the trade value that was accumulated by those that were trading back, I think it was probably best to hold on to some of those picks. But Jordan Addison, I think that we look at some of their issues in the playoffs and what hurt them against the Giants is not having that additional option alongside Justin Jefferson. And we know that Justin Jefferson is this supreme talent, an all-pro type receiver who's going to finish in the top 3 in receiving. To put Jordan Addison into the mix, who I have said is not an alpha. He's not going to be your go-to number 1 option. But in the right situation, he is a fantastic number 2. No more Adam Thielen. And I really believe that Jordan Addison can thrive in this situation because attention is not going to be directly put on him and everything is going to be diverted away towards Justin Jefferson. So you're getting a really good route runner. You're getting a guy that is a strong yak player. He's not necessarily a high play strength guy. He's not somebody who's going to break a lot of tackles because he's quite thin framed. But because he has that value after the catch, and again, being a strong secondary option, I kind of compare it situationally. And it's not like a total one-to-one comp, but to what the Philadelphia Eagles have with Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown, where if Devontae Smith was the only guy there, he's not going to be as productive. It's going to be harder for him to be productive because he's just not that type of receiver that is going to command a ton of attention and be able to work through all of that added attention by a defense. But instead, he's got A.J. Brown there, so it opens him up. So I really think that this offense can thrive now that they went and got a first-round caliber receiver.
I think basically what you're saying are the Vikings are going to win the Super Bowl next year.
That's what I heard.
Well, no, go to the Super Bowl and lose. That's the
okay. Well,
you know what? I'll take this going there. I'll take this getting there at this point.
I got to ask you on our early round secondary, Blackman and Jay Ward. Either of these two day one ready?
I think that Blackman is, and I think that Ward can contribute. I think at the very least for their value, you don't need to draft guys on day 2 to be high impact starters. And I think that sometimes it's like a common misconception that a lot of people hope that these second round, third round picks end up being really high level players. And as long as these guys are on the roster for their full contract and they're rotational players, that's awesome value. Blackman, I think, is an interesting player because he has throughout this process been brought up as a bit of a steal in a way, for if depending on where he ends up going. And he was certainly a strong performer at the Senior Bowl. So I like both these picks. And for a team that's got a pretty significantly aging secondary, this is a nice addition.
All right. So after the draft, the Vikings made a splash. All the fans are excited. We got Ivan Pace Jr., linebacker Otis Cincy. Number one, were you surprised he didn't get drafted? And number two, do you think he's a guy who can actually make the final 53 for the Vikings?
I wasn't surprised that Ivan Pace went undrafted just because of his physical limitations. I mean, he's 5'10". He's significantly underweight. He doesn't have a lot of length. I thought what he did at the Senior Bowl might have calmed some of those concerns because there were questions of if he could cover. There were questions of how well does he move off ball when he's not blitzing as much. And I thought he looked really good. And admittedly, I kind of stupidly was really high on Ivan Pace, and I had him ranked highly in my linebacker rankings, which I kind of regret now, but I think he makes the roster. I think that this is a guy who isn't going to be a starting linebacker on your roster, but what you're getting with him is somebody who's going to be a kick-ass special teams player because he's almost like a pit bull in a way, like a small pit bull that's just running around, hair on fire, 100 miles an hour. And I think that's exactly what you want on somebody who's running down on kickoff, running down on punt, all of those things. This is the type of guy that you want.
All right, final one for Joe D. Put your psychic hat on real quick and take Jordan Addison out of the mix.
Mm-hmm.
4 years from now, who's going to be the most impactful player in the NFL out of these guys?
Man, my projection, I'm going to give you two, and then two guys we spoke highly on. I think Mekhi Blackman and Dwayne McBride are going to be the two that are going to be the most impactful from this class. I still really think that McBride is a sleeper. You know, if something goes wrong with Dalvin Cook, maybe he goes down early with an injury. Do not be surprised if he's one of those dudes that we're saying during fantasy football, like, wow, why did this guy rush for 900 yards this season? Where the heck did this guy come from? Because it's such a run-centric offense that I think that he could have a pretty early impact and maybe has an impact for 4 years to come.
Oh, nice. Joe D bringing his A game once again. We appreciate it, man. We appreciate it. Check out the links down below, and something tells me we'll be seeing you soon.
Of course, guys. Appreciate you having me on as always, and always down to hop on, talk draft with you guys.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks again.